This guide has been inspected and approved by Luminous.
Hey guys, this is Sunsfan and welcome to the official Dota Cinema Guide to Kunkka. If you aren't familiar with this hero, you may want to watch the introduction we did for him at the corresponding link. Kunkka is a strength initiation hero who tends to be played as more of a side carry. He unfortunately, or fortunately depending on your perspective, is notorious for being a one-hit wonder. Skill build. We're going to stick with two general builds for Kunkka. The first is our default build for all-around purposes. If you're thinking about getting first blood with some lane combination, then take Torrent first. Otherwise, the general build is to get Tidebringer first, and to max it by 7. In many cases, this will win you the lane since it's very difficult to avoid this skill. At 2 and 4, you'll get Torrent, while of course getting Ghost Ship at the standard 6, 11, and 16. Depending on how the game is going and whether you need to guarantee your Torrent, you could potentially get a couple levels of X marks the spot before finishing off your Torrent. But because we're sticking to generalities here, we're going to say you should typically finish maxing your Torrent before getting any into X marks the spot. By leveling Torrent, not only does the damage increase, but more importantly, the slow will last for a longer duration. Now if you're a new player, then don't be ashamed of stopping at level 2 for X marks the spot. This of course will make it a lot easier for you to land your Torrent properly. But as you gain more experience, try to level it up, because the casting range increase can make a world of difference. The second build is if you have some guaranteed stuns. You're basically taking the first build and changing the priority of Torrent to first and Tidebringer to second. To spell it out, you max Torrent by 7, no matter which path you want to take with it, and then you max Tidebringer by 9, leaving X marks the spot for last as per norm. Item build. For starting, get your basic health regeneration to go along with a stout shield and some branches. You'll definitely want to turn those branches into a wand at some point because your mana capacity is one of your weakest points. If you're expecting to farm for a long period of time, a Quelling Blade could also be a good choice, although last hitting creeps really isn't too difficult with Kunkka. Boots for Kunkka are kind of split between power treads and phase boots. Power treads are nice for a stats boost, although the attack speed doesn't really come into play with Kunkka. However, if you're a clever player, then you'll change to int treads whenever casting a spell, since it'll allow you to save up a lot of mana. Phase boots are good, since they add some extra damage to your punch in the face initiation. It'll also provide you some extra move speed, which can be crucial in chase situations, which is another forte of our friend Kunkka. Into the core items for Kunkka, there are some variations from player to player. An early Vanguard could be looked at if there's sufficient physical damage coming from the other team. Normally though, it's not needed, so going straight for a Shadow Blade is very popular. Shadow Blade allows you to initiate with lots of burst damage, which of course really plays well with your Tidebringer passive. If you feel some mana capacity is needed, then getting drums should also be looked at, since having one on your team is pretty much always a good idea. Regardless of what you decide, after Shadow Blade, you should go for some damage, namely a Crystallis, which of course you'll turn into a Daedalus. With good timing and a good prayer to your god of choice, you could potentially kill an entire team in one hit with a nice Shadow Blade Daedalus combo. Into the late game, your choices open up. If you need some tankability in fights, a Heart would be a nice choice. If you're getting focused down by magical attacks, then a BKB is a pretty obvious pickup. On the other hand, if you just want to farm even more, then a Battle Fury could also be looked at. Lastly, if you want a mix of tankiness to go along with potential DPS output, go with an Assault Cuirass, since you'll gain a ton of armor, attack speed, and lower everyone's armor, therefore allowing you to deal that much more damage. Gameplay. Kunkka's laning experience is really freaking easy. Tidebringer will win you the lane more often than not. If it doesn't, either you're doing it wrong, or you're really doing it wrong. But throughout the game, depending on your item choices, your mana capacity is absolute garbage. This means using Torrent to farm is a no-no. Of course, an early Battle Fury or drums could technically remedy this to some degree. Either way, Torrent is most commonly used as a follow-up spell. This means that someone on your team will actually initiate for you, allowing you to hit a proper Torrent. Now late game you become a much better initiator since X marks the spot is basically a spell that will allow you not to embarrass yourself with mistimed Torrents. One last note with Torrent is the cast animation is very distinct, and when activated will cause the enemy to most likely dance around in the lane. Use this to your advantage and play some mind games. Perhaps cast it in a location you'll think they'll move to, or better yet, use S to stop the actual spell from coming out, therefore keeping the enemy on their toes at all times. Tidebringer is just stupid. It deals ridiculous damage in a cone-shaped AoE, which of course if you're going against it, you will swear to the gods it's bigger than the tooltip says. It's also not reduced by the target's armor value. Added onto this is a little trick. It works for denying, but doesn't actually activate. This means you should be able to out-deny your lane if you aren't getting harassed too much. X marks the spot is obviously a combo with Torrent, but has so many more uses. It's arguably the best single target chase mechanism, especially when leveled. I mean, enemies can TP to their base and still return, which of course is always hilarious to see. And lastly, your ultimate ghost ship has a couple main uses. First, the obvious. It'll deal AoE damage, which is great for teamfights, and will also stun through magic immunity. It can be difficult to hit, but luckily for you, the other benefit of the ship is felt regardless of whether you hit it or not. The move speed increase allies get is nice, but Kunkka's Rum gives you an 8-second buff of taking 50% damage. This is huge for teamfights, but can of course be a little deceiving at the same time. You'll still take the damage you receive during this time eventually, but luckily it will not be the source of your death. This in many ways is a double-edged sword, since teamfights that seem to be going well, in actuality may not be the case. This is where good game sense comes into play, aka knowing when you should retreat or keep on fighting in battles. Whatever the case, Kunkka's Rum sounds mighty delicious. For actual teamfights, landing your ship is difficult without someone to initiate for you. If you happen to land a good torrent on bunched up enemies, then, well, most of your work is done. Either way, positioning and communication are key to landing good combos with your team. Whatever your combo is, for example a torrent into a ship, or the other way around, you'll typically see Kunkka players then Shadowblade in and hope for a monster crit. Of course, positioning is apparent even in this act, since you want Tidebringer to hit as many people as possible. Friends and foes. As we've talked about throughout this entire guide, friends for Kunkka are those that can help him set up a nice torrent, especially in the early to mid stages of the game. Examples of this include Shadow Demon, and, well, Shadow Demon. That's how good Disruption into Soulcatcher is. Aside from Shadow Demon, Lion and Crystal Maiden are also good candidates. Crystal Maiden especially with her Frostbite, as well as the helpful Arcane Aura that Kunkka loves so much. Yeah, that's what Kunkka loves about Crystal Maiden. Heroes that you should stay away from as Kunkka are those with Silences and Mana Burn. One that fits both worlds is of course Silencer himself. But in the Mana Burn department you also have good old Anti-Mage and Nyx Assassin, while in the Silence department you have Bloodseeker and Doombringer. Lifestealer is also a decent counter to Kunkka since he tears through strength heroes, as well as can disable the X marks the spot with his Rage. But the most important foe for Kunkka should be obvious. It's Tidehunter. I heard the source of such hatred between them is that Kunkka ate Tide's babies, but unfortunately nothing's been confirmed. Thanks for watching guys, and please remember to subscribe to our YouTube. Also a big thanks to Flawless and Luminous who helped create this guide. You can check them out at their YouTube channels, which are linked in the video description. Also be sure to check out our website at dotacinema.com and like us on Facebook at facebook.com/dotacinema.